we'll start in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Rishabh, is Mr. Ram joining in?
Yes, I just called. He also has another meeting, but he'll join. So this is also being telecasted live on YouTube.
That's the first one, I think. I haven't attended a webinar which was, live on any platform till now.
Yes, we just thought it's for easier access and also for later recall value. It's good to just put it on a social media platform. Sometimes we use Facebook, sometimes we use YouTube.
So do you plan to send out the recording of this post-event to all the registered?
Yes, we'll do that.
So Rishabh, Orly is also not with us.
Yes.
We should wait for a bit, or do we get started?
We should just start maybe in a minute.
Okay, in that case, I think we'll get started. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this Friday afternoon for the latest installment of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water's Parishad webinar series. Today's webinar focuses on the issue of making India's PV manufacturing self-reliant, a matter that resonates with Prime Minister Modi's vision for a self-reliant India, or an Atmanirbhar Bharat. I am Arjun Dutt, Associate at the CEEW Center for Energy Finance. CEEW is one of Asia's leading not-for-profit policy research institutions. The Council uses data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to explain and change the use, reuse, and misuse of resources. The Center for Energy Finance is an initiative of CEEW that plays the role of a market observer, non-partisan market observer and driver in clean energy markets and emerging economies. CEEW-CEF engages closely with the industry and policymakers to offer timely and market-responsive solutions to challenges constraining the energy transition. CEEW-CEF has been extensively engaged with PV manufacturing in India. Last year, we published a report that analyzed the key challenges constraining domestic PV manufacturing, as well as the efficacy of safeguard duties in addressing them. Following on, today we are releasing a report that presents a comprehensive suite of measures, both short-term as well as medium-term, needed to propel India's PV manufacturing on its journey towards self-reliance. The analysis presented in this report is informed by data inputs from PV manufacturers, representing nearly 60% of India's module manufacturing capacity. Today's webinar features a panel discussion on the challenges and solutions for scaling up domestic PV manufacturing. We have a distinguished panel with us of experts on PV manufacturing, both from the domestic market as well as international markets. We are also honored to have those at the helm of affairs with us today. Mr. Amitesh Sinha, Joint Secretary at the MNRE, and Mr. Rajnath Ram, Advisor Energy at the Niti Aayog. Both of them are rather busy today, so we will hear from them first and then get on to the wider panel discussion and briefing presentation. So, Mr. Amitesh Sinha, I would request you to deliver your opening keynote address. Mr. Sinha, like I mentioned, is Joint Secretary at the MNRE. He is responsible for all administrative and financial matters of the National Institute on Solar Energy, SECI, the CPSU scheme, the KUSUM scheme, solar manufacturing scheme, rooftop solar, and a range of other issues associated with India's energy transition. Mr. Sinha, we're honored to have you with us today, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Arjunji. Since we are talking about solar PV manufacturing, we must understand the background of this. Right now, every year, the annual addition, more than 75% of that is from renewable energy. And we are close to 600 gigawatt solar installation in entire world. Growth in solar PV manufacturing since 1992 is almost 38% per annum. The CAGR is, you can imagine the CAGR is around 38%. And we are at the beginning of the global growth curve. It is expected that by 2050, more than 4,500 gigawatt would be our requirement. And right now we are at 600 gigawatt. So there's a huge scope, and unless we become truly Atmanirbhar, our future growth will be at risk. Understanding this, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, we have taken a number of steps to promote domestic manufacturing. So in the beginning, we thought that the domestic content requirement will help our industry. And seeing that, we have provided this in our 3 flagship schemes. First scheme is CPSU scheme, where the government will be producing electricity and government will be consuming. So our CPSUs will come at the forefront, and 12 gigawatt of capacity we have provided under this scheme. Then there is a rooftop phase 2 scheme where we are providing government subsidy, 40% for up to 3 kilowatt and 20% above 3 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt. In this residential component, total requirement is 4 gigawatt. There again, domestic content requirement, meaning that solar cells manufactured in India and solar modules manufactured in India are compulsory required. And then we have PM KUSUM scheme, which covers entire rural area. And there we have 3 components. The second and third component relates to solar pumps. There we are providing this domestic content requirement of solar cells and modules. And more than 20 gigawatt of domestic content requirement is there. So altogether, we have 36 gigawatt. And you know that at present in our country, we have 16 gigawatt of module manufacturing capacity. And effectively 8 to 9 gigawatt is utilized. So we have enough on plate, and we can we have given enough demand to our domestic module manufacturers. As far as solar cell manufacturing is concerned, the present capacity in country is only 2.5 gigawatt, where the requirement is 36 gigawatt. So for them, we have given enough demand, and on the basis of that, now we are seeing many manufacturers are coming for setting up solar PV manufacturing units in India. In preference to Make in India order, that is again a compulsion for our CPSUs and government procurement. We have mandated use of domestically manufactured modules again. So that is an area where if a SECI or NTPC or any government company is going for their own project, then they have to compulsorily buy Indian modules only. To promote manufacturing, we tried many ways, and one out of that was manufacturing linked tender. So we floated a tender without depending on any government subsidy. And there we provided that if any company or any investor wants to establish a solar manufacturing cells and module plants of 1,000 gigawatt, then they will get 4 times of solar PV projects, and PPA of that will give them incentive to set up such kind of manufacturing units. So you all know that we have concluded a tender in this regard, and 3,000 megawatt capacity of solar cells and modules will be manufactured. And in addition to that, 12,000 megawatt of solar PV plants will be set up. We earlier 2 years back, safeguard duty was imposed, keeping this in mind that it will promote solar manufacturing. But since the duration of that safeguard duty was only 2 years, so it could not generate enough confidence in our manufacturers to promote them for setting up plants. So this year again, it has been extended for 1 year, but we are not relying on that. And to give a fairly stable policy regime, we have proposed from Government of India side a basic imposition of basic custom duty. So it is under consideration at highest level, and very soon we will have some kind of decision on that. There we are trying to provide enough safeguard so that our Indian manufacturers can able to cater the need of Indian demand, and their cost and their interest is protected for a few years. And then we expect them there will be enough competition, because we are seeing a lot of manufacturing interest from domestic as well as foreign investors. And if present module capacity will become 25 gigawatt from 15 gigawatt or become 30 gigawatt, then we can understand that there will be enough competition amongst them, and it will not drive our cost up, rather it will drive our cost down. The present cost difference of around 20% between imported modules and domestic modules, I think that it will come down in future. Maybe after 2 years or 2.5 years, we will see a declining trend in domestic module manufacturing price also. We are also working on new manufacturing scheme, because we understand that there is a risk, and if you are trying to compete with other foreign countries, particularly China, so we have to provide same kind of ecosystem and same kind of facility that they are getting there. So keeping that in mind, we are working on some schemes where we are trying to provide them a capital cost at a cheaper rate, which is available there also. We are also trying to provide electricity at a cheaper rate, which they are getting there also. And in addition to that, some extra we are trying to add from our side. Since such kind of scheme is still under consultation, I cannot give more details about that, but we are working on that. Seeing a clue from wind manufacturing, since we are already Atmanirbhar in wind manufacturing, we have close to 9 to 10 gigawatt of capacity installed in the country, and the present requirement is around 2 gigawatt. We have seen that many foreign investors are coming to India to set up their new plants. So some of existing foreign players are expanding their capacity, but many new players are also coming, and they are telling us when we are interacting with them that they are seeing India as a global manufacturing hub for wind manufacturing. And very soon we may see that this 10 gigawatt will become 15 or 20 gigawatt. So you can understand the interest we are attracting from outside, particularly in wind manufacturing. So I'm expecting a similar trend in solar manufacturing, because same kind of sentiment I am seeing from such foreign investors who are approaching us. We are trying to establish a manufacturing hub in different part of country. If these manufacturing plants related with solar PV or wind PV, wind manufacturing, if they are coming at one place, we from Government of India side can also provide some facility, maybe in terms of power, maybe in terms of some other kind of thing. So we are interacting with the state governments one by one, and we are also interacting with port authorities. We had written a letter to shipping also. They have identified few ports, and we will soon finalize 4 or 5 such places where we can direct our investors in case they ask us to give us a location. And we are also collecting all incentives from different state governments. So whatever incentive they are offering, we will collect and we will provide on our portal. To facilitate such kind of investment, MNRE has formed a project development cell, and I'm heading that cell. The objective of this to handhold domestic as well as foreign investors who are coming to India. And right from the beginning, at the time of identification of location, we will stand with them till the finally they set up their manufacturing plant. So this is again initiative from our side. We are interacting with Department of Revenue and Department of Heavy Industry because we understand that setting of manufacturing plant will need lot of capital goods, import of lot of capital goods. So for duty exemption on such capital goods, we have earlier asked our industry to give us a comprehensive list. They have given us, and we are interacting with Department of Heavy Industry and Department of Revenue, and we will try to publish such list which will give them confidence further. Our Honorable Minister has also discussed on few occasions for providing open access to such manufacturing plants, and we are also working on that. The details I cannot give you right now, but once it is finalized, we will share with you. So we are also working with that. We have requested DPIIT and Commerce Ministry. We have written to Ministry of Finance also for providing some kind of export incentive, because the manufacturers who are coming here, they are not just coming to cater the need of domestic industry. They are also looking for exports, and I guess they will serve other countries, European countries and USA and other Asian countries also from India. So this is a golden opportunity for us. And from MNRE side, we will try our best to attract global investment as well as domestic investment. There are few panelists who are here. They are also interested in domestic manufacturing. We are interacting with them also. I hope the efforts of MNRE will help them. And very soon we will see India truly Atmanirbhar, particularly for solar PV manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for your insightful and wide-ranging remarks. It's very heartening to see the commitment of the government of India towards the energy transition and particularly PV manufacturing. You're right. This is a particularly good time to move forward with the agenda of Atmanirbhar Bharat, particularly with the world looking to recalibrate supply chains pertaining to PV manufacturing away from traditional places such as China. And you spoke about a wide range of measures ranging from demand-side drivers to those pertaining to ease of business, such as manufacturing hubs, a range of incentives, and also trade barriers. All these are the pieces that come together to form a vibrant PV manufacturing ecosystem that can propel us towards this goal of Atmanirbharta. So thank you very much for your remarks. So from Mr. Sinha, now to kick off today's deliberations, I would request Mr. Rajnath Ram to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Ram is Advisor Energy at the NITI Aayog, and he has been working on government policy and program formulation related to oil and gas, power, renewable energy, and coal. He also leads NITI Aayog's initiatives on creating a robust energy data management system and setting up an energy modeling unit within the NITI Aayog. Mr. Ram, we're honored to have you with us here today. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon to all the distinguished participants here. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, please.
So I think a lot of the things have been already mentioned by Mr. Amitesh Sinha, the Joint Secretary of MNRE. And we are working very closely with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to come out with the new manufacturing policy. And we have several deliberation and discussion with them. So let me begin by saying that I will touch up only the few aspects because a lot of details has provided. But India as the third largest solar market, and it has set up an ambitious target of about 450 gigawatt renewables by 2030 and 300 gigawatt itself for the solar PV itself. So we need to have some kind of manufacturing capacity in India here, because the solar manufacturing capacity, if you compare to the China, etc., we are nowhere. We are nowhere because China is currently has a manufacturing capacity that exceeds the global market, and where one manufacturer can have more than all the Indian manufacturing capacities as of now. We had to have the bolstering domestic solar cell manufacturing capacity, and that's the key for the backward and the forward linkage of manufacturing evidence in the future as well. The abundant availability of the local cells, and that has to be also integrated in the value chain. And to promote the domestic manufacturing, it is more important to create a right kind of ecosystem. We need to focus on creating manufacturing capacity throughout the country, similar to just like a solar park, with availability of the entire supply chain, research and development, equipment manufacturing, and then also linkages with the industry and academia. This will not only bring down the cost drastically, but also the R&D centers and universities can be used to focus on innovating new age solar technology in terms of product and manufacturing practices, among the things. But at the same time, you should have the demand visibility. That is very, very critical. And of course, the DCR program that we are focusing on is a great example of a policy with a long-term potential. The STD pipeline and the forecast will be crucial over the next decade to ensure that domestic model manufacturing can truly scale up and compete globally. The combination of demand creation with the linkage with the forward and the backward supply chain has to be taken into account. But overall the cost has to come down. Then only you would be able to success in the market. There are several other areas of the government that can act to incentivize the company to boost or set up new solar component manufacturing capacity. Because manufacturing has to deal with this significant cost related setting up like assembly lines, land acquisition, labor, these taxes, power, all those aspects. And we are working very closely with the different departments so that these manufacturing policies come out, the government, and we move very fast on this. We must need take cues from the China, because Chinese government has not just consistently supported the industry with extreme low cost, but also they have pushed the technological enhancement through the solar top runner program. The primary focus for the program has been to manufacture high efficiency solar modules through the research and innovation and eliminating the outdated technology. So we have to keep these aspects in mind. Solar component manufacturing, because it's a capital intensive, technology is constantly changing. So maintaining the scale and also at the same time, the promoting R&D in this space, that's all very, very crucial. The way forward for India could be to produce a giga scale using cutting edge technology, and also catalyze the local R&D to continuously upgrade the gigafactories to the global level. So that is the overall goal for promoting the manufacturing capacity in India. This is the broad thinking on which NITI Aayog is working with the different departments, and we are under discussion with the MNRE, DPIT, and other related ministries, so that the manufacturing policies come out in a short time. So with these remarks, I thank you, the organizer, for inviting me for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ram, because I know that you're quite busy today. So in fact, you've made my job very easy, because a lot of your interventions, ranging from R&D in modern technologies to achieving scale to the demand side drivers, are all important components of a strategic industrial policy for India's clean energy sector, including manufacturing. And a lot of what you have already stated, is included in the report that I spoke of in my opening remarks. And like I said, there is a lot of resonance between what you have said and our findings. And to set the context for today's deliberations, I'm going to now present some of the key findings from our latest analysis on scaling up India's PV manufacturing in order to achieve self-reliance. And after this, we will have, I will hand over proceedings to my colleague Rishabh for the wider panel discussion to hear the views of our distinguished panelists. So now I'm just going to now share my screen to start the presentation. Right. So a quick introduction about the research focus of CEEW, which spans multiple facets of the energy transition. The energy access, renewables, power sector, and the industrial sustainability and competitiveness focus areas deal with issues of a near to medium term relevance. Issues of a longer term relevance constitute the subject matter of the low carbon pathways and risk and adaptation focus areas. We also extensively analyze the governance and trade related aspects of the energy transition, as well as keep a close eye on over the horizon technologies under technology, finance and trade. And finally, the CEEW Center for Energy Finance aims to deepen markets, increase transparency, and attract capital to clean energy sectors and emerging economies. So a lot of my work has already been done by our distinguished speakers before me, but in order to understand the need for a concerted effort towards self-reliance, one only needs to look at the current status of PV manufacturing in India. India's PV manufacturing footprint is currently limited to the downstream stages of the value chain, that is cells and modules. Even here, the existing capacity is only a fraction of India's annual deployment requirements. More importantly, even the existing capacity is operating at only around 50% utilization rates. This is partly because some of this capacity is outdated, but mostly because domestic capacity lacks competitiveness versus imported modules, particularly from China. Based on inputs sourced from the industry, we estimate that at 50% capacity utilization levels, Indian modules are around 33% more expensive than their Chinese counterparts. If Indian factories were operating at full capacity utilization levels, this price difference declines to around 22%. Now, in order to understand why Indian modules are more expensive, let's first take a look at what determines module selling prices. So the cell to module stage in PV manufacturing is one characterized by high annual operating costs, particularly raw material costs, as compared to capital expenditure. Therefore, you see that the bill of materials accounts for around 85 to 90% of the selling price of the module in both India and China. The other components of the selling price include overheads such as depreciation of plant and machinery, logistics costs, electricity costs, direct costs such as labor, as well as financing costs. These other costs are also a smaller proportion of the selling price for Chinese modules, primarily because Chinese facilities enjoy economies of scale and have access to finance on better terms. So based on our analysis, when looking at Indian and Chinese modules at full capacity utilization levels, we find that higher bill of material costs account for 56% of the price difference. Higher overhead and labor cost as a result of lower scale for Indian facilities accounts for around 36% of the difference in prices, and financing costs account for around 8% of the difference. So in order to increase the competitiveness of India's manufacturing facilities, we need higher capacity utilization levels, cheaper sourcing of raw materials, and higher scale. In order to achieve these outcomes, we need a range of interventions that can produce a vibrant PV manufacturing system, overall ecosystem rather. So our recommendations are segmented into those immediately needed, short-term measures and longer-term measures that are needed to propel India on its pathway towards self-reliance. So in the immediate term, trade barriers constitute a useful measure that can provide some protection to the domestic industry. The MNRE has already indicated its willingness to impose a basic customs duty on cell and module imports. However, the actual quantum and timeline of the duty proposed still remains to be spelled out. We recommend that the government present a long-term roadmap for the imposition of duty, comprising of both the ramping up and ramping down of duties over a period that is long enough to help the industry achieve competitiveness. The implicit recommendation, of course, is that once the industry achieves competitiveness, tariffs would be removed, and therefore a defined period is available for the industry to become globally competitive. Another source of uncertainty that needs to be looked at the moment is the imposition of BCD on the clearance of goods from special economic zones to the domestic tariff area. A large proportion of India's PV manufacturing facilities are located in SEZs, and the imposition of BCD on SEZ to DTA clearance adversely impacts their viability, and from a longer term perspective, future investments in SEZs from the perspective of PV manufacturing. So this is another issue that needs to be looked at. And while the government has already announced that duties will be imposed, a quick caveat: these duties may be subject to challenges at the WTO as potential violations of India's Information Trade Technology Agreement. Moving on, though the BCD would help the domestic ecosystem, it may not immediately boost demand for domestic modules due to the availability of change in law clauses in REPPAs. Therefore, to offer immediate relief to some of the stressed manufacturing units, we recommend the imposition of a short-term production subsidy up till the end of the year, the financial year 2021. We recommend that this subsidy be limited to 250 megawatts per manufacturer, and the imposition for a short period of time would also possibly help avert challenges related to production subsidies at the WTO. Now, apart from trade barriers, as the distinguished speakers before me mentioned, greater demand certainty is extremely necessary in order to stimulate new investments at scale. The government can start by announcing its commitment to cell and module manufacturing by announcing a firm target for capacity addition. Similar to the case of project deployment, a firm capacity target offers a useful reference point for both policymakers and investors to organize their actions around. To complement this policy target, we recommend the scaling up of some of the DCR programs, such as the CPSU and KUSUM scheme, to offer guaranteed demand to domestic manufacturers. Now, of course, the qualifier here is that government procurement schemes don't have to cater to the entirety of domestic production. Rather, these schemes should be used as a catalyst to scale up domestic manufacturing to a level where it reaches competitiveness. And after that, the domestic industry can cater to the larger requirements of India's energy transition and also produce for the world. We also recommend that the domestic procurement schemes be used to incentivize high efficiency modules. Not only would this facilitate investments in high-tech modules in India, it would also help bring down tariffs and reduce VGF support required under these tenders. So the trajectory of module efficiency that you see on the slide is only indicative, and the actual trajectory of efficiency improvement that we recommend under the domestic procurement scheme would depend upon the actual technology of modules that are being used. So while India already has cell and module manufacturing, we also strongly recommend a move towards backward integration. Now, while polysilicon is widely available in a number of jurisdictions at the moment outside of China, such as Germany, South Korea, and the United States, Chinese manufacturers closely control wafer production. Now, changes introduced at the wafer stage in terms of the dimensions of the wafer itself can potentially lead to a requirement to overhaul manufacturing lines at the cell and module level. In order to mitigate this risk, we propose a phased plan for backward integration, starting with wafer manufacturing and moving on to polysilicon. We feel that PSUs such as BHEL and Bharat Electronics Limited that already have an exposure to the electronics industry could take a lead in the indigenization of upstream PV manufacturing. In order to exert even more control over the supply chain, we also recommend the indigenization of manufacturing equipment for producing cells and modules, Currently, this manufacturing equipment is imported in India. Beyond backward integration, horizontal integration is also another area that can be looked at. A number of Indian MSMEs are capable of producing non-cell BOM components such as EVA backsheet, tempered glass, and junction boxes. However, there are concerns over the competitiveness of the product produced by these MSMEs as well as its quality and reliability. Therefore, this particular area needs a bit more analysis to understand the root causes, and then appropriate policy action can be taken to encourage production in India itself. In addition, as was already discussed before my presentation, the setting up of manufacturing parks can help attract investments, large-scale investments in manufacturing, and support is needed for R&D and the commercialization of novel technologies to facilitate their deployment in the Indian context. Now, while some of these measures can help scale up domestic manufacturing in India, policy making should also be cognizant about the pitfalls that must be avoided. So some of the previous schemes that incentivized PV manufacturing, such as the MSIP scheme, were characterized by long delays in the disbursement of incentives. Such long delays tend to adversely affect perceptions of ease of doing business. And any new schemes that are introduced should be complemented by prompt and timely disbursal of incentives. Secondly, schemes that aim to simultaneously promote manufacturing and project deployment may not necessarily result in the best outcomes. An example is the manufacturing linked tender, which does not necessarily address the underlying causes of the lack of competitiveness of domestic manufacturing. At the same time, by requiring the project developer to also set up PV manufacturing facilities, it can potentially result into higher tariffs to compensate for the higher risk of the tender overall. And with such high tariffs, it becomes challenging to find off-takers for the electricity generated, as has been the experience with the manufacturing linked tender that was awarded earlier this year. Lastly, PV manufacturers often find it a challenge to get debt capital from domestic financial institutions. This is partly because these financial institutions do not have the technological capability or the exposure to PV manufacturing to assess loan proposals accurately. We recommend the hiring of external consultants and even IREDA, perhaps, that can take a role in facilitating the accurate assessment of loan proposals to accelerate the flow of debt capital to the PV manufacturing sector in India. So these were some of the key takeaways from our analysis. And for a more detailed look at our recommendations, please refer to our report that is now available on our website. So apart from the areas that I've outlined, the panel discussion that follows will also discuss some other key points. Some of these pertain to implementation level challenges associated with product certification in India, as well as implementation challenges associated with tariff barriers, particularly safeguard duties. The panel will also discuss the deployment of high technology modules in India and the kind of support that is needed to facilitate both R&D as well as commercialization to facilitate deployment at scale. So that is it from me. Thank you very much. I will now hand over proceedings to my colleague Rishabh Jain to introduce our distinguished panel and to commence the panel discussion. Over to you, Rishabh.
Thank you. Is there an echo?
No, you're fine.
Okay, one second. Hello. Hello. Yes.
Much better now.
Okay. Okay. So thank you so much, Arjun. And I'll also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sinha and Mr. Rajnath Ram for their opening comments. They were very helpful and also gave us a sense of the direction of the thought process that the government is undertaking right now. What I'll do from now is I'll quickly introduce all the panelists, and then I have some opening questions for each one of you. And from that, we'll directly dive into the panel discussion. So first, Mr. Sai Baba Utukuri. Mr. Utukuri is an industry veteran with over 34 years of experience. He is currently the CEO of Vikram Solar Limited. one of the largest solar module manufacturing companies in India. He has been actively working in the renewable energy sector for 2 decades with companies like Lanco, Inox Wind, and Suzlon. His experience in setting up and expanding the manufacturing facilities and project deployment has been tremendous, and we look forward to hearing from him today. Welcome, Mr. Utukure. Next, we have Ms. Aurélie Bouvet. Aurélie is the Policy Director at Solar Power Europe. Solar Power Europe is a member-led association having 200 plus members from 38 countries. Aurélie is in charge of developing and implementing the association's political strategy and advocacy with the support of Solar Power Europe's strategy committee. She also manages the policy team and coordinates the deliverables of Solar Power Europe's task forces, providing members with high-quality market intelligence and technology-focused reports. She has previously worked in European energy sector for more than 8 years and has a long-standing experience in public affairs. Welcome, Aurélie, to the discussion. Next, Mr. Rohit Kumar. He is the head of Indian subcontinent for REC Solar. He has been with REC for over 8 years and has been heading REC operations in the Indian subcontinent for past 6 years. Under him, the Indian entity has grown multiple folds and has emerged as the largest European brand of solar PV supplier in the country. The team has also grown with the success today, and REC now has pan-India reach. Rohit has had experience of over 21 years and has worked with many companies, including Moser-Baer and Wipro Eco Energy in the past. Welcome, Rohit, to the discussion. Next, we have Ms. Mirunalini Chelappan. Mirunalini is a second-generation entrepreneur driven by passion for a sustainable future and clean tech, specifically solar. She is the director at Swilect Energy Systems and currently head of solar PV module manufacturing division and head of projects and special projects at Swilect Energy. She has over a decade of experience in the solar industry with both products and projects. Welcome, Mirunalini, to the discussion, and thank you for joining us today. So what I'll do is I'll have one first initial questions for each one of you, and I'll want each one of you to respond to that. And basis the discussion and maybe some earlier points that either my colleague Arjun or Mr. Sinha or Mr. Rajnath Ram posted, we can do a deep dive. So first question to you, Mr. Utukure. One of the key things that we constantly hear again and again is, of course, the BCD. But in the last 2 years, we saw safeguard duty was already implemented on solar modules and solar cells that were imported in the country. Now, it has also been extended for 1 year now, till July next year. So quickly, I want to check with you, what has your perception been on the safeguard duty? Did you think that it was helpful for the manufacturing industry? Did it serve the purpose? Or did it just lead to other challenges like increase in tariff and, of course, other barriers that developers are facing? So if you could share some light on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishabh. Good day, everyone. And thanks for having me on this forum. I think safeguard duty was a good initiative to create kind of a support for the Indian manufacturing from the unfair trade practices being followed by a couple of countries in the neighborhood. So it is a kind of a protection which gives you from dumping immediately. I think that's a good initiative. Unfortunately, it did not do so much good, in the last 2 years. The main reason is it has, a pass-through mechanism was available for developers. Most of the business happens through bidding here in India, and all these projects, at the time of bidding, if there is a change in law in the post bidding, so they get the pass-through. In the process, there's not much benefit, in terms of market happening for domestic manufacturers. Second thing is, I think close to about substantial amount. I think if I'm right, about 4,000-5,000 crores cash was collected from imports. If the same money would have been deployed in the manufacturing, it would have tremendously benefited Indian manufacturing. But unfortunately, it has become another source of income for government of India than using this for actual manufacturing. I think I only hope that BCD, whatever we are introducing, will learn lessons from, say, safeguard duty positives and negatives, and ensure that BCD, when we are implementing BCD, we actually implement in such a way that it actually supports manufacturing in a substantial way. One way could be like, for example, if the BCD is passed through, and again, while Mr. Amitesh Sinha has very nicely elaborated and presented the excellent program of Government of India, which I am very thankful to him. I think I must say that Government of India is doing an excellent job on manufacturing, trying to help manufacturing sector in a very proactive way, in spite of their own limitations in the ministry, because they have to get this thing done through various ministries. Mr. Rajaram also very nicely put together all points. But my point is, when it comes to BCD, we must learn from safeguard duty. That is, if you are giving a pass-through without giving any support to manufacturers, it will not do anything. So the way it can be done, and you will have to do some kind of a support to IPPs. If you don't do that, then there is not enough manufacturing capacity available in the country. Those projects also will not happen. That is not in the interest of the country. So we'll have to have a more balanced kind of a policy framework where it actually supports Indian manufacturing. Since we are likely to collect a substantial amount of money, why don't we use that money in terms of production incentives for the manufacturers, so that it becomes revenue neutral for the Government of India. At the same time, manufacturing gets substantially benefited, and IPPs also will have an interest to buy from here. Otherwise, Indian manufacturers will not be able to compete with Chinese in spite of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that comment. And not just that, I think there are also certain loopholes that exist in the current duty structure. Say, for example, Malaysia is still exempt. So even when any imports happen from Malaysia, they'll still be exempt, and no safeguard duty will not be implemented on that.
Yes.
From here, I'll probably come to orally. We know that all the countries globally are planning a recovery from COVID, and manufacturing will play a very important role, not just to reduce import reliance, but also to add to jobs. So what are some of the initiatives that governments across Europe and also your association is undertaking to scale up the manufacturing sector and support the existing manufacturing companies in Europe?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Risha, for this question, and congratulations to you and Arjun for this event and for the study. I fully agree with the comments that are made on the chat. It was extremely informative, and I look forward to reading the full document, really. So indeed, I mean, as you said, COVID-19 has had an impact and triggered, let's say, a new understanding of the importance of retaining, to some extent, manufacturing for strategic value chains. And it is clear that when we look at solar, we have a strategic value chain. We have a technology that is going to power more than 50%, according to our scenarios, of Europe's energy generation by 2050. So it is going to be a matter of energy security for us at some point, also to relocate part of the manufacturing. It is also the biggest job provider in the whole renewable sector when we look at solar energy. And it is, on top of this, becoming the most affordable source of energy. So all of this for us indeed are very good reasons to work on manufacturing in Europe and supporting our industry there. Obviously, we're coming from far to some extent, in the sense that the European market has gone through some turmoils in the past years, some of which was, according to our industry as well, the establishment of a minimum import price. So that's very interesting to hear that on this fora, it is seen as a short-term measure that could trigger manufacturing. Maybe every situation is different. It is true that in Europe, the impact of the minimum import price or the import duties was not the impact that we were hoping for or that was expected. And the main impact that we saw was, in the end, the contraction of the European market due to the fact that these duties made solar more expensive compared to other technologies. and made our developers less competitive as well compared to other companies. So in the end, it had a bit the reverse effect. And indeed, we should not forget that 70% of the jobs in the solar sector is also located in the installation and the downstream. So it has really had a strong impact. So coming back from this and the fact that now the measures are gone for good, as we see it at European level, we are indeed, as you pointed out, thinking on ways to have a smart industrial policy for our industry that would fit our needs. And here we have, well, I would say maybe three very important pillars. The first one is in general building a business-friendly environment, and that's a bit what our distinguished colleague from Vikram Solar was saying just earlier. I mean, you cannot only look at duties. So we are advocating quite heavily towards European institutions also to have a business-friendly environment for our companies, because there is one thing with import measures that we also realized is that it is not because you put in place import measures that you strengthen the internal and inherent competitiveness of your own industry. So how to make our own industries more competitive in a global environment, that's really the challenge. And indeed, business-friendly environment, so access to infrastructure like land, as it is done in several countries, providing, for example, competitive electricity prices for the most intensive parts of the value chain, like polysilicon extraction, reducing administrative procedures, extremely important. So, for example, in Europe today, to build a factory, it can take you up to 2 years. Today in the solar sector, in 2 years, your technology is outdated and you need to change all your equipment. So we definitely need to have a different approach towards this, and exploring eventually as well financial incentives, so such as tax credits notably. A second very important aspect in which we have been quite good so far in Europe is also supporting a vivid R&D environment. So we work very closely with the research institutes, associations. And in fact, there was a call, joint call of more than 150 organizations and research institutes 6 months ago, Solar Now, which called for reviving solar manufacturing. And here, well, we need the budget, we need to support them, but we also need to help them creating strong links with manufacturing companies. So we also noticed in Europe that if you want the R&D institutes to survive, you need manufacturers that invest in them as well. So that's a very delicate ecosystem, and this word was mentioned many times, ecosystem, and that's really what we're looking at here. The third element, it was mentioned again, access to finance. So in Europe, as it is in India probably, when we look at the financial institutions, solar manufacturing is seen as extremely risky. So obviously the cost of finance is much more important. And here it is really, again, it has a domino effect, because if you have a higher cost of finance, you will not be able to be competitive, and you will never find off-takers, because there are no credible off-takers worldwide that will commit to buy much more expensive technologies if it harms their competitiveness because it's too expensive. So we also need to close the loop on the financing side in order to bring the off-takers on board. So one initiative that we have done at Solar Power Europe, and I will not extend more to leave some time for the discussion, but we have created in May this year what we call the Solar Manufacturing Accelerator. So that is a European initiative where, as Solar Power Europe, working with more than 50 European manufacturing companies, we are trying to build this ecosystem that has been already highlighted by several participants. And so we want to replicate here some of the successful initiatives that we have seen in Europe, like the European Battery Alliance or the European Hydrogen Alliance, where you kind of need to take everyone by the hand and put them together in a room for some time in order to find a common understanding. And for that, the second thing that you need is a very strong political support. So I don't know how it is in India, but in Europe, we are working heavily in order to get strong support at the highest level, so at commissioner level, to really take a strong stance to say, as Europeans, we will support solar manufacturing on the long term. So I would invite everyone that is interested as well to consult the Solar Manufacturing Accelerator, and I'm happy to detail it in more details in the Q&A sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurélie, for touching upon multiple issues. and there's a lot to learn for India, both from failures and successes from Europe. And I'll touch upon one specific thing that you mentioned, is that we should not limit ourselves to our country or a particular region, right? BCD, or say basic customs duty or a safeguard duty or even minimum import price, will only make the local manufacturers competitive in that particular region. They will still not be able to compete in other regions, right? And the market will not only grow, maybe get saturated in Europe, maybe get saturated in India 10 years, 15 years down the line, but it'll continue to grow in a lot of other developing countries. So we need to expand our focus area. But in addition to price, one important aspect that many consumers look at is the quality, which sometimes when you talk about price is takes a back seat. And right now I want to bring in Rohit here. And one of the things that Rohit, you have often mentioned is that you are somehow been very successful in selling solar modules, which are as high as, I would say, twice as expensive than your counterparts, or at least the modules that are sold in the country, right? So there's a huge delta, and it's not, it cannot even be called a delta. It's like a factor of 2. Now, and you have been able to convince your consumer, as in your customers, that, okay, this is the technology that you have to go forward. I would want to understand from you and from your experience of working in the Indian sector, how you were able to do this, but what is the role of next generation technologies in the module industry, and how can the country, through various policy measures, support deployment of new technologies? Over to you, Rohit. Now.
Thank you. Thanks, Rishabh. Thanks for setting up this platform for us, and a fantastic panel here. So, see, a couple of things here. One, when we talk about traditional technologies, the legacy technologies which we have been selling in India till date, we have been working with 20 to 50% premium over competition. So this is primarily a P mono or poly-PERC technology, and when we are competing with poly technologies and all. Now, so we have always worked with the strategy to qualify our customers, to understand what their needs are. And our best success has been with customers when we have access to the decision maker there, and a customer who's looking at the long-term reliability of the asset. Now, when you look at solar, it is it is a high capex capital intensive investment, which basically puts pressure on the overall cost of the system. And in India, solar modules constitute more than 50% of the overall system cost, which puts the highest pressure on us as a manufacturer to reduce our price. So at the same time, we give a counter argument to the customer is that when the module is going to be 50-60% of the total cost, you need to pay more and more attention on the quality of the product, and the reliability, the long-term reliability. And solar is not it's not a depreciating asset; it's an appreciating asset, because your energy cost is going to increase year on year. So from that perspective, these are the kind of discussions we have with our customers. And our biggest selling point has been our voice of customers and our track record. So we have done third-party testing of modules from the site, and we have taken the data to the customers, and they have seen the kind of degradation that REC modules have. That has actually enhanced. And the second is the voice of customers. One customer has used our product, they refer us to other customers, and then it's a much easier sell that way. Now, going ahead, the new technologies, that is something which we're working with. We have launched our heterojunction technology last year, so which takes us to the almost the pinnacle of the highest efficiency products. And this is a product which we are selling at twice the cost, as compared to the other technologies available, mostly from China. So now this technology comes with its own benefits. It's lower temperature coefficient, much lower degradation as compared to other products. Reliability is also very high. So all these factors, provide higher energy yield, not just in the beginning, but over the lifetime of the asset. Now, so what we tell our customers is, don't just look at the module cost, look at the total system cost and what you're getting as an output out of the product, of the whole system. So, because when we are giving a higher efficiency product, we are helping you reduce the cost of the system. And you also need to, do a quantitative analysis, but then there has to be a qualitative aspect to the, system also. You just can't quantify everything. we provide a 0.25% yearly degradation, but the actual degradation may be as low as 0.1% or even 0.5%, because our polyperk modules in Rajasthan have degraded by less than 0.25% on a yearly basis, which is a third party, tested, wherein the warranty terms were 0.7% year on year. So these are the kind of factors we talk about, but the challenges we face is, today when we compete in the India market, while we don't have these products being manufactured in India, we have to go through the, and we are not dumping into India, right? We are selling a product at twice the cost, which is very good for rooftop industry because rooftop space is limited, especially in the medium and small rooftops. The idea, and you're going to do installation once in 25 years or 30 years, you need to maximize and try and put the best technology available in the industry there. So, but again, we face challenges like, the safeguard duty increases our cost even further. Now with BCD coming in, that will increase it even further. So a customer who wants to invest in the latest technology, instead of getting incentivized there, they're getting penalized. And then there are challenges around BIS. These are all good measures, but the way they have been implemented, there can always be a learning from that, and we can improve. We can't do everything right from day one. So I'm not saying that, what Indian government has done is wrong. It's a very good measure actually, because what we did beginning was we scaled up the demand. Then, everybody came to India today. I'm sitting here with REC here for almost a decade now. So the idea is now to streamline our operations, make adoption of higher technologies faster, because unless and until there is a demand for higher technology, there will not be a business case to implement, add manufacturing capacity with the latest technologies, which come at a higher capex, substantially higher capex. So these are the kind of challenges I believe, and this is the approach we take here in India.
Okay, that's very helpful, Rohit. I'll take a cue, and you briefly mentioned about BIS, and while I move to Mrinalini, I'll want to know from you, Mrinalini, that some of the measures that India has implemented in the past, like either BIS, ALMM, they were considered not only for quality control, but sometimes also viewed as a non-tariff barrier to avoid some of the imports in the country. But it has both the effects, right? Of course, you can avoid and have some kind of, say, roadblocks for low quality systems to be sold in India. But at the same time, these challenges are also being faced by domestic developers, domestic manufacturers, specifically those who are of smaller manufacturing capacity, because on a regular basis, you have to go and certify. So if you could share some of your experience of dealing with these processes on our, say, BIS or ALMM have achieved their quality in terms of maintaining the quality, and what would you suggest going forward the government should focus when they're either thinking of R&D or certification?
Yeah, thank you, Rishabh, and thanks for the opportunity given, and congrats on the report. You've really covered the most pertinent points and given a good solution. So now coming to your question, what is it that we can do in terms of BIS and ALMM? So there are two aspects in BIS certification that we're talking about. One is the commercial and the other is the technical. So let us start with the technical aspect. Number one is when the way the BIS has been implemented. The first time that BIS was introduced for the solar modules, they followed the IEC 2005 version. And at that time, IEC had already moved to 2016 version. So now the companies were required to have an IEC certification for 2016 with 2016 for their export market. And some of the customers do demand, even though BIS is there, they do demand for the latest IEC version. And for those manufacturers who already have a superior certified product have to spend again to recertify with BIS for a lower quality of certification. So this was the first challenge we had where, what as a manufacturer we felt was, for manufacturers who already had IEC, why should we retest? The same IEC certificate could have been used by, the report alone could have been generated by BIS. If at all they wanted manufacturers to test in India, that could have been applied for imported modules, not for Indian manufactured modules, which have already been tested at TUV or UL and leading accredited labs. So that is one. And then another one is that BIS demands that whatever you certify, If you submit a 300 watt cell, then you would get certification only for a 300 watt cell. Whereas earlier it used to be under IEC plus or minus 10%. So your range could be extended. Right now, with the way the cell technology is changing and the efficiencies are changing, by the time we apply for BIS, we submit the samples. After 4 months, we get the report on hand. Already the efficiency would have improved, which means we have to reapply for the certification. And there are other minor points like, asking us to display the wattage on the front label. So those are things that, the BIS, it is a very good move that the government has done. But the way it has to be implemented, I think they have to take back and consider the feedback from the stakeholders and implement. So this is on the technical aspect. On the commercial aspect, if you see, yes, BIS is expensive. Like we said, if we have IEC, why should we certify again with BIS when it follows an IEC standard? It's not that BIS is anything different from IEC. And there are many nitty-gritties. For example, if you change a cell, then it demands for a certification of the module completely. Why should cell change be considered as a as a complete BOM change? Shouldn't it come under retest guidelines? So these are certain things that the government has to take into account and understand that already in India, we are heavy on depreciation, expenses due to depreciation, and there should be a guaranteed offtake. So when you certify a product, there should be a guaranteed offtake that happens within 2 years because your technology is going to change. So those things have to be considered before, to have an effective control on quality and implementation on BIS. Okay. And secondly, coming to, yes, Rishabh, please.
No, go ahead, sorry.
And next is coming to what should be R&D, the focus on R&D. We strongly believe that whatever, the manufacturing incentives given, the production incentives given, or the tax breaks, those should all go into ensuring that R&D, those incentives can actually get into setting up the R&D facilities. And those incentives should go to institutes and industries that have their own R&D facility and use that innovation and those technology to manufacture the modules. So that should be the way to go. So when we build up, when we say that India has to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, then yes, import substitution is a short-term plan, but the long-term plan would be export promotion. And how do you do that? Till date, India is still only acting as an assembly line for all the technologies, not only for modules. Most of the technologies you take across the various industries, we are an assembly line. We are not innovators. We do not have a technology which is our own. And so which means that we need to heavily start investing in R&D. Like already said, we need to have a strong push from the government, which ties up the institutes, which ties up the industries, and create a demand for the technology, like how China had the front runner program. So without the R&D, without innovation as the core, that should be the core. And from that comes, yes, your cell manufacturing. If you're going to manufacture cell, do you have a semiconductor fab? India does not have a strong semiconductor fabrication facility. So then to do that, do you have the infrastructure? Is government going to provide the land? But it's good to hear from Mr. Sinha that, we have that in the pipeline. So which is really good to know. So one is that. And from there, when we talk about manufacturing, are we talking about equipment manufacturing? Still, that is an imported component. So how are we promoting that? And the third is how you said, horizontal integration with EVA, backsheet frames. So how strong are we? Till date, it's still cheaper to import a frame or a glass rather than buy from India. So how are we going to address these issues? So for all this, if the technology and if there is a government push from inside, that is when India can truly be self-reliant. So we strongly feel that whenever government talks about the future of India, talking about solar by 2030, so many gigawatt, whatever it is, it should start from R&D, from innovation. And then that should be the driving factor for other industries and to push manufacturing.
Okay, that's very helpful, Nalini, and thank you for those comments. one of the things that you touched upon is polysilicon manufacturing in the country. And the issues that were highlighted by all of you were mostly immediate and the operational challenges that we face either in India or outside. Now, in the next 15 minutes, I would now want to focus on what are the, say, medium-term or long-term requirements for the industry and what have our experience been in the past. So I'll come back to you, Mr. Utukuri. And if you can build on the point that Mirunalini made on the polysilicon facility, you tried to set this up before 2010, before the National Solar Mission was in place. If you could share your experience on that and what were the challenges that you faced at that point of time, what were your learnings? But can we do this now, maybe 20, 25 years down the line? Can we attempt a polysilicon manufacturing facility again in the country?
Excellent. Thank you, Rishabh. I think excellent panel we have had today, and with the outside the government officials like Amitesh Sinha and Rajaram. And your compliments to you for an excellent report, what you have come up with. Your recommendations are all absolutely right on the dot, let me be honest.
Thank you.
And special mention, the youngest one in the whole lot, as what I could see, is Mrinalini. I think my compliments to you, Mrinalini. You spoke very nicely, and I realize, I really encourage you. You should start getting into the industry discussions more often. You know, being I'm very happy to see you here and speak so nicely on the policies. Coming to your question, Rishabh. Absolutely right. I think what Narani said is absolutely on the dot. Especially, we cannot just have an industry which is depending on the tariff barriers. You know, we cannot. Then we will not be able to build a globally competitive industry in India. Okay, the opportunity we are talking about is not a small opportunity. If you see, you know. If you want to complete the national, the immediate requirements of meeting 100 gigawatt, you have to import close to about $18 billion worth of modules and components in next couple of years. $18 billion. If you want to be self-reliant, right from polysilicon till modules, what is the capex which you require? Just $2.5 to $3 billion. The number which I was told is about 5,000 crores was just collected from safeguard duty. And we are likely to collect another 7, 8, 10,000 crores. If you can deploy the entire money into the manufacturing alone, is more than sufficient for us. We don't need to depend on anybody. We will be 100% self-reliant. We'll be able to build close to about 20, 25 gigawatt of kind of an industry. So when I'm saying 20 gigawatt manufacturing capacity of polysilicon to 20 gigawatt of manufacturing of ingots, wafers, cells, modules. And I'll come back to because I need to give time to others also to speak. I'll come back to your specific question. Yeah. Your specific question is, what is the polysilicon? And what happened with polysilicon? I mean, actually, I was representing a company, you know, in fact, I was in the wind industry from 1999 till 2007, and when I was getting sleepless nights saying that wind is not the solution, wind alone is not the solution. India has to look at something else different, and I found solar as very interesting. Then I got in. I just left everything, being a CEO of a very large company, got into solar too. I have gone to Europe and listened to QCell's managing director and UUPV. I have attended. I went to China and attended. Europe was concentrating on the market development. India was concentrating on the market development. Exactly reverse of that. China said the power cost is exorbitantly high. We will not subsidize power cost. We will not buy high power cost. They have declared solar manufacturing as a strategic industry way back in 2004. And they put all their money into manufacturing. That point in time, India had excellent technology. From 1980s onwards, we had BELs, CELs, BHELs of the world, who were much more stronger than Chinese and all other players, and exporting solar cells from India. Okay. And Europe had great facilities like QCells, the largest solar cell manufacturer. What happened is Chinese have got a typical way of, bulldozing the whole industry, creating a fear among manufacturers. They built the scale. Okay, with the scale, they have given a kind of trade practices where they have given free land, free building, free money to the industries to manufacture, capital investment, everything. They said, you go and conquer the world. They went and conquered the world. They said, how the Chinese is cheaper. World thought it is because of the manufacturing costs in China are cheaper, which is not the case. It is because of the support the government has given to the Chinese manufacturer, it has become like that. The Q-cells lost out to Chinese cell manufacturers. India lost out. India never focused. India spent couple of billions of dollars in subsidizing the power cost, buying the high power cost. We never put even rupee on manufacturing side at all. We came out with CEEW-CEF benefit, we came out with MCEEW benefits. They never passed on to the manufacturers directly. There is no rupee benefit has been given to manufacturing industry as of today. Very little, maybe MCEEW, some small, here and there has been given. The point is, what I'm trying to say is, if you want to build an industry, you need to have a political intent. You need to have a commitment. You need to look. You don't look at it as a temporary kind of a phenomenon. My barriers lagata hu, and I will meet my self requirement of 6-7 gigawatt. It doesn't work. If you want to build an industry, you have to build a globally competitive industry. What Mrinalini has said, and I'm very happy to hear from an young chap like this. That it has to be import substitution as well as export promotion. Only when we actually get into that, we will be able to build that. What it requires to do that. Okay, where exactly the competitive disadvantage is there as a country we have. One is we don't have scale. Our finance cost is very high. Our access to finance is not there. Okay. Number 4, when unfair trade practices are being followed, we don't respond immediately. Okay. We take a lot of time to debate and all that, being a democracy. There is a plus and minus we have as a country. Okay. And there is a technology obsolescence. If you want to build an industry, if there is a problem, okay, fine. What Chinese do? They do 500 megawatt this year. Next year they do 1 gigawatt they add. Third year they add 2 gigawatt. Fourth year they add 4 gigawatt. When the scale is building up, the first 500 megawatt, even if it dies, doesn't matter. Whereas we don't do that. We'll say that you have become an NPA. 500 megawatt we lose our steam, and we'll say that it doesn't work. Okay. If it doesn't, so what we need a financial institution. We are completely finished financial institutions in India, unfortunately. We had ICICI, IDBI, all these industrial institutions which are able to finance these our manufacturing industry. Today it is not there. We have got only commercial banks which is funding even automobiles. The same commercial banks will also appraise solar manufacturing. They don't know anything about solar manufacturing. They say that this is a very technology related, high risk, I will not fund. So the access to finance is not there. So we definitely need to address all this if you want to build a competitive industry. We just want to have only a small kind of import substitution, and I want to protect my industry. I want to, it's a game is different. The way we did the built automobile industry in the country from 1995 onwards, we have put trade barriers. Yes, we have given an ecosystem we built. Complete ecosystem we built in Chennai. 3-4 hubs we have taken in Gurgaon, in Pune. We took 3-4 hubs and we actually gave full support. And even today, automobile, if you want to import, it costs 100% duty you have to pay. Okay. Now we are able to export out of India. The trade barriers are important, but at the same time, you need to build that competitiveness with the ecosystem. To build ecosystem in the solar manufacturing, we definitely have to go backward integration. For example, if you are concentrating on imposing duties on modules, then they will start dumping cells. The moment you concentrate on, you add cells, then they will start dumping wafers and ingots. Okay, the game is not going to stop. In the process, we lose 10 years. And 100 gigawatt global market will reach 200 or 300 gigawatt. Okay, and we'll say, no, Chinese are very big. We are only 10 gigawatt, we will not be able to compete. You will never compete because you don't have intent. You don't have commitment. Okay. So, and what we are talking about, not big money, $2-3 billion. What is $2-3 billion? We are able to invest close to about $18 to $60 billion for 450 megawatt, 450 gigawatt. The entire $60 billion can be met out of $4-5 billion, which is not a large money, which you can get out of BCD, safeguard, or whatever it is. But that intent has to be there to plow back that money into the industry, which is not happening. Like, for example, coal cess, when we were done, coal cess was used up for Government of India for some other purpose. It was never used for mitigating the coal. So what I'm trying to say is, polysilicon, the previous company I used to work with, okay, we have initiated from sand to power kind of a strategy. Okay, when we are trying to build polysilicon plant in Orissa, we lost 3 years because of the approvals. First, they said it is not possible because of what do you call? They got confused between silane and trichlorosilane. And unfortunately, in the top administration, a very senior administrative officer was there, but he was an arts background. He didn't understand what is trichlorosilane, and he kept the file away for about 2.5 years. So we lost it. Then we got it resolved. Then in the meantime, we have had a surprise that any plant which is coming up within 10 kilometers distance from the sanctuary, we will not give permission for any manufacturing unit. Okay, that rule was not there before. So we lost out another 1 year. So by that time we shifted the plant to Chhattisgarh. By that time we built the plant. We wanted to build the plant. Chinese were not manufacturing any polysilicon at that point in time. Zero. They became very big. So we developed cold feet and we said, we will not do it.
Okay.
And the institutions will not give. This is the kind of an example of what I'm giving. So you need to have a political intent. You need to have a strong commitment to build. That is required. That I'm not seeing. Like, for example, export incentive has to be given. It has to be given. It has to be given. And there is a great opportunity now because Europe and US are shocked by the COVID now. They said we have to have alternative supply chains today.
So, Mr. Vutukuri, sorry.
Thank you.
I'll just thank you, Mr. Vutukuri. That is one experience that we need to learn from. That at least there's some intent, and we need to see how learnings from that can be taken forward in terms of the time taken for either process or approval. I'll come back to you, Audley. There are two things that if you can touch upon, and Mr. Vutukuri also spoke about, is the financial institution, the role of certain banks or lenders to scale up manufacturing. If you could, what are the key recommendations probably you will give either to the government or these financial institutions, and what is the role that you think these institutions can play to scale up domestic manufacturing?
Great. You asked me to reply?
No, Orly, if Orly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishabh. But indeed, I think a lot of things were said just before by my colleague, Mr. Vutukuri. I think the role of financing indeed here is extremely important. But in terms of recommendations, I would really come back to what I said earlier, like that it's been some time now that we've been working on industrial strategy at Solar Power Europe. And what we realize is that we need all of the pieces of the puzzle together. So, for example, what Mr. Vutukuri said about having clear political guidelines, that is absolutely essential. And we have a very fresh example in Europe, which is the European hydrogen strategy. Hydrogen has been in the pipeline for a very long time. All of a sudden, every door is opening. It is not a miracle. And the first reason why all the doors are opening is because the most important policymaker of the European Union, Mr. Franz Timmermans and the President-elect Ursula von der Leyen clearly expressed to the industry that they would support this industry and that they would support this industry on the long run. So I think when you start with such a strong political commitment, obviously, as a financial institution, you're much more relaxed about investing in such a technology. So indeed, that is the first aspect. In a part of this puzzle is also, for example, looking at the domestic demand. And that is something that I think where both India and Europe should improve. The Indian solar market is far from where it should be. The European solar market is far from where it should be. And when you have a strong pipeline of domestic demand, you already have a very strong incentive for manufacturing, and you support greatly the cost competitiveness even, well, facilitating much strongly access to finance, obviously, because you have a pipeline of demand. So in Europe, for example, we should be installing at least 50 gigawatts a year. And we are still below 20 gigawatts a year. So really here, I think to secure financing, that is a very important element. And obviously, you need not to sustain demand for any type of manufactured PV component, but those that you want to support, so the most innovative, the most efficient, and the most sustainable ones. And that's what our colleague, Mr. Kuma, was saying as well, that at some point you probably need as well to change the approach of public, let's say, support with tenders that go a bit beyond costs. For example, you need to find a way to value quality, which is not at all the case today. So in Europe at the moment, we're thinking on how to reshuffle a bit public tenders in this sense, in order to create again a better pipeline of demand and reassure the investors on the fact that even though it is more expensive than what you might see on the market today, this demand will shift in the future towards these qualitative products. And maybe one last aspect where I think it's all been mentioned by all the colleagues. I mean, we need reciprocity at global level. And unfortunately, on this last element, I have no silver bullet, because I think we are all in the same basket. We're all in the same game together. And it's very hard to ensure that your efforts will not be harmed by unfair practices abroad. And indeed, your competitors are always adapting to every decision that is taken in a major market. So today, for example, the EU is trying to look at what they call unfair foreign subsidies, in order to make sure that when you are, as a European market, interacting with another market, you can take appropriate measures if you have, on the other side, some practices for financing, etc., that are not declared or proportionate, and that therefore is what we call dumping. But this last element, at the end of the day, will also be the one that will condition the strong involvement of the financial investors, because even today, when you look at the Battery Alliance, for example, which is a huge effort to try to relocate part of the battery production in Europe, and here as well, the challenge is huge. There are no guarantees that despite all the efforts and all the money invested today, we will not be in a situation where someone is doing it like us, but stronger, or playing different rules. So yeah, that has to be solved at some point, but I have no answer for this.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Rohit, if I may come to you now, and just in the interest of time, there's a final question I wanted to ask you. If REC has to set up, if you have to convince your management to set up a manufacturing facility in India, what would your three asks be from the government? Or what would you think that if these three conditions are met, you can convince your management to set up the manufacturing facility in the country?
I think Sai Baba sir has already said everything which could be said there. But I think, today, the key here is to, look at new technologies, and the cost of the capex for setting up new technologies is substantially higher. So government has to incentivize, either by giving an upfront capital subsidy. Getting it later doesn't happen. I think Sai Baba sir has so much experience in this. I really don't want to say much, but across the industry, whatever subsidy commitments were made by the government have never come. And it has to be done really upfront. If I take it's just one thing actually. If I take a leaf out of what Europe is doing today, Europe is, a couple of countries there. REC is in advanced discussions with one country, wherein the government is offering upfront, capital subsidy. Second, off-taker guarantee. Third, reducing the cost of finance. That's it.
Okay.
So, create a demand for the next generation technology, show a pipeline for the next 4 years. Give some, what I'll say as a follow-up to Sai Baba sir is, we have to blow the trumpet. It is war. It is not just China. It is not just India. Every country across the world is being dominated by China. And we need to think out of the box, go beyond what the Chinese did. You know, they have used their PSUs, their state-owned companies, to acquire the best of technologies everywhere. And they have invested in R&D, and they are now beating the best players in the world. So we need to use our PSUs, form JVs, upfront cash, subsidies. Then companies like REC will come in. You know, these are the things, broadly, which we can look at, and it has to come with a lot of conviction and commitment there. You know, you just can't come out with a policy. You have to reach out to these companies, through the Indian PSUs, or whichever way you want to do it. If Mr. Modi needs to call them, let him call them. But we have to do it at that level. Otherwise, we hired someone in India to work with Invest India to try and find something, where we can work together on. Trust me, with the best intentions, we could not go past one presentation to our CEO. So that's where we are today. And if we need to make things happen, we really need to do something really big. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rohit. Mrinalini, I'll come to you. And maybe if you can add on if there's anything specific to Rohit's question, and if I may frame the question differently, what would incentivize Select to not just scale up, say, module manufacturing facility, but also, say, start thinking about cell and other BOM components, right? Be it junction box, EVA, backsheet, and other components. What would the ecosystem requirements be, and not just from MNRE, maybe from the local state governments also, maybe other important stakeholders in the sector?
Okay, so the first and foremost would be the infrastructure, like everybody's told. So anyway, I think the government is thinking of setting up or is already in the process of setting up manufacturing hubs. So that would definitely help. So having the land, water, power. So if the ease of setting up a plant becomes easier, and the cost what the company is going to put in is majorly, and the effort is concentrated towards the plant and machinery rather than the other the land and the building and all, then that would definitely help. That would be the first one. And next is definitely like how Mr. Rohit had told, we definitely need a guaranteed offtake. It has to be there. It has to be ensured through DCR. I don't know, that might again create issues with, like, how Ms. Aurelie told, reciprocity. So without affecting that, how are we going to create the guaranteed offtake? That has to be, be given a pipeline, or the projection for the next few years. Definitely we need to have. And the third would be the government to definitely look into giving, the tender should not be, competitive or reverse auctioning or competitive tenders, because that is where people, the entire, we are all losing out on that because of competitive tenders and L1 based systems. People that really offer good quality with high TCO, total cost of ownership, are losing out on that. That is where the volumes build up, right? So instead of that, if the government can go with a simple feed-in tariff kind of system, which is how the rest of the world have promoted their solar installations, that would again be, helpful. And these are the things that we would expect the government to support us with. And of course, tax credits, tax breaks, capital subsidies, those have been covered. These are the additional points.
Okay, thank you so much. We have reached 5:30. So unless someone has a pressing point to make, I'll just thank those and probably conclude the session. If you have any pressing points, please let me know.
I have one point to make, actually.
Yes.
I think the panel has done an excellent this thing, and especially Rohit and Arli, very good point, excellent. Apart from Mrinalini, which I have become a fan of her today. Let me tell you one thing. I think I completely agree with what Mrinalini said, especially because the cost of power generation from solar is the lowest today among all energy sources. If you add with storage also, recent competitive bid, it has come to close to about 280, 290, which is again excellent. And as what I see, at least 5 to 7% reduction is going to be there for next 8-10 years as far as solar is concerned. So the tariff is not an issue with solar. Our obsession to get the lowest tariff, whether it is 2 rupees 33 paisa or 2 rupees 30 paisa, it doesn't really matter. Even if it is instead of 2 rupees 33 paisa, if it becomes 2 rupees 45 paisa, is it going to affect the consumer so badly? Because anyway, thermal power plant cost of power generation is close to about 3 rupees 75 paisa to 4 rupees 50 paisa today. You are giving much cheaper than that. Okay, with storage, if you are able to give 3 rupees, you are able to give a dispatchable power equivalent to thermal power plant at much lower price at 1/2 Then why should we compromise on for technology like what Rohit said? Why don't you give the 20 paisa, 30 paisa? Why don't you promote quality and technology? I think this obsession towards lower prices has to be.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
One last one from me. I think, what China did is they, 20 years back, they decided solar is where they need to build their infrastructure. So while we need to take them on right now, we should also hedge our bets. Why not, apart from storage, why not look at hydrogen also? Government needs to expand the vision and, work with the European Union and bring the hydrogen development into India also. Collaborate, invest in them. I don't know how we can do it, but there are many ways we can think of doing that. So we need to be, get a look at it from a broader perspective or a macro perspective. While we focus on solar, we also need to look at what is going to be there in the future and start working on that right away.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If I might add to that very quickly, just to say that there's a very that Goldman Sachs, in fact, has also done a study recently that shows very clearly that the ongoing hydrogen revolution is going to be a key driver and game changer for solar manufacturing. So very fair point from our colleague here.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and I thank all the participants here who have joined us today. One of the key things that I thought came out of this discussion was the political intent. So industry and different institutions have tried to do whatever is possible in their control, but sometimes either the political intent in their own country or the political intent in the other country, because it matters how the other country is also viewing the same industry, has either played a spoil sport or either incentivized companies to set up manufacturing in the country. So I think we have started with the hashtag Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think the next step would be we actually set up infrastructure and provide the necessary support. And towards the end, Mirunalini opened up, and Mr. Utukuri also mentioned, it's a Pandora's box, I think, L1. We need to definitely think about it. And there have been multiple concerns that different stakeholders in the sector have voiced. Maybe we'll as an institution level, we'll also think about it. But going forward, we'll continue to work with all of you, specifically Orly, and see how we can facilitate certain interaction either between industries or between governments in India and Europe, and not only scale up manufacturing deployment, but even generally the sectoral deployment. In addition to solar module manufacturing, as Rohit and Orly mentioned, hydrogen, but also there are a lot of complementarities with energy storage, where we are also assembling right now. The sector will also grow right now, grow in the coming decade. So why not start today and lead the sector globally? So that is something that we should also look out for. The report is out in public domain now. One of my colleagues had shared the report in the chat box here, but it will also available on our website. Please go through this. If you have any comments, recommendations, suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us. We look forward to your feedback. And I right now would want to thank my colleagues Riddhima and Sachin, who helped us organize this session. It went without any technical errors. Thanks to them. And I also want to thank my co-authors Arjun and Kanika, who played a very important role, and we three of us as in wrote this report. And I hope this is helpful for the sector in the long term. So thank you so much again, Mr. Utukuri. Thank you, Orly. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Mirunalini. Thank you, Arjun also.
Thank you.
Thanks
Everyone. Pleasure.
Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that went well. That went